Let's take a look at graphing on a TI-83 calculator. And these are all our basic building blocks of graphing. You may already know how to graph these. That's not the point here. The point is we're trying to learn all the basic building blocks so we can then combine them together later on and make more complex graphs. So let's look at our first one. Y is equal to x. Well, come over here, press, let's turn it on, and I'll press my y equals clear to clear out where I was not line, and then I'll push the x key. That's this one next to the alpha. This looks like xt theta little n, so I'll push that, and that puts the x on there, and then you press graph, and that'd be your answer. Let's say you got an error, or you will at some point. So let me show you how to fix graph mode on TI-83 calculator. If I press y equals, one of the things that can happen is you see across the top says plot 1, plot 2, and plot 3, and you can try this yourself. You can go ahead and try to see if you can break it. Trust me, you'll be able to fix it for this. Again, I press my y equals to get here. You see my flashing cursors on the x? If I press my up arrow, and my flashing cursor is now in plot 1, press enter one time, and then press your down arrow. What you'll see is plot 1's highlighted. Now, one of three things will happen if you got any of these highlighted across the top. Let me press graph and see what happens here. This is one thing that happened. You get an invalid dim error. The other thing that'll happen is sometimes it'll just work. Sometimes you get your graph just fine. Another thing that'll happen is you'll have extra boxes on your screen, extra garbage on your screen. Anyway, I want to press enter here. I go back to y equals. We don't want anything highlighted across the top. Those are statistics graphing functions. So if I do my up arrow, put my flashing cursor on plot 1, press enter one time, down arrow, then all those are gone. That's one of the things that'll happen. Another thing that'll happen is, I don't think it's on TI-83, maybe it is. Yeah, it is. If I down arrow far enough, see how there's a Y0? Occasionally students will get down here and somehow they'll enter in garbage. They'll have some garbage down here, and they don't realize it. So they're up here, and it's like, okay, well, I've done everything perfect. Press graph, and gives you a syntax error. And you think, well, that's weird. And quit's already highlighted, so people just press enter and quit. Then they go back to y equals, and it's like, well, I don't see anything wrong. It doesn't get any simpler than this. So they think, well, maybe it's a quirk. I'll try it again. Press graph. And look like it's working, but then it pops up a syntax error again. What you should always do instead of quit, you should always choose go to. So down arrow to go to, and press enter, or press the number 2. And it'll take you to where the error is, and you'll see, whoa, I have some extra garbage down here. And then press clear. I used to accuse my students of drinking while they were using their calculator. That's the only way I could figure you get garbage like that down there. And then one semester I had a student explain that they throw their calculator in their backpack without putting the cover on. And then I could understand how you get garbage down there. I no longer accuse them of having an alcohol problem. Okay, another thing that can happen is sometimes your zoom can get screwed up. And if you press zoom, and you choose 6 for Z standard, so zoom 6, that'll set your viewing window back from -10 to 10 on the X and -10 to 10 on the Y. Let me show you an example of that. Sometimes people go in a window by accident and they'll put something in here like 20 where the X min is greater than the X max. And then if they press graph, it gives you an error window range. Again, zoom 6 will fix all kinds of errors. Now, those won't fix every problem on your calculator, but if you told me it's 95 or 98% of the problems, it wouldn't surprise me. Let's look at our next basic building block. Y is equal to x squared. Okay, now press my y equals, clear to clear out wherever's in that line. Press my x key, and then I'll push this x squared button. And then graph. And that'll give us our answer. Our next one, that was the second one. Our next one, we want to equal to y, look at y is equal to x to the third. Now I don't care what y equal to x to the third looks like. I'm looking at how you handle it when you got any number up there in your exponent. 4, 5, 6, 20, 310, so forth. Yeah. I'm going to press my y equals. You can freely go back and forth between y equals and graph, and how to exit out of anything is second mode. Second mode. So if you ever get anything you don't know what you're into, do second mode, exit out. But anyway, I'll go back to y equals. Clear. Put in my x key. How you always do any exponent on your calculator is this caret. It's above your divide. So I'll press my caret, and then I'll put in 3, and then I'll push my graph button. And that'll give us that, more or less. Our fourth one we're going to look at is y is equal to x to the 1/2. Now I could care less about y is equal to x to the 1/2. I'm showing you how to handle it when you get any fraction in your exponent. Now this is more than just a fraction in your exponent, but this is actually how do you handle it when you have anything more than a single number or a single variable in your exponent. The trick to it is to put parentheses around your exponent. So again, if you have more than a single number or a single variable, put parentheses around the exponent. Other than that, you type it in as you see it. So I'm going to press my y equals, clear, do my x key. We always do the exponent with a caret over here. Beginning parentheses, 1 divided by 2, closing parentheses, and then graph. Some models of the text-based instruments is very forgiving about closing parentheses at the very end, but I'll put them there just for good practice. And it gives us that for our graph. Now our fifth one we want to look at is the square root of x. So I'm going to press my y equals, clear, the square root. Not everything can be on a button. Some things are above a button. If you see here your x squared, there's a square root symbol above it. So to get to that, we're going to push our second button one time, and then we'll push the x squared. And you should see it put the square root and then the beginning parentheses. So then I'll put my x, and then I'll put my closing parentheses, and then graph. Now you may be looking at that, it's like, well, that gives me the exact same graph as the other one. It should. Y is equal to x to 1/2 is that actually the same as y is equal to square root of x. Cube root is another one you see fairly often in algebra. So let's take a look at it. I'll press my y equals, clear. Now if it's not on a button, it's not above a button, it's probably underneath your math button. So if I press math, you see the cube root is the fourth one down there. So I can either down arrow and highlight number 4 and press enter, or I can just simply press 4. It puts a cube root, puts a beginning parentheses for me, so I'll put x, and then I'll put a closing parentheses. And then I press graph. And that's going to give us that right there. Well, let's take a look at how to do the fourth root of x. Now, I'm demonstrating here how do you handle it when you got any number in this slot. 4, 5, 6, so forth. The number in the slot is called your index. So let's see how to handle it when you got any number in that slot. First thing we got to do, well, after go to y equals and press clear, is we have to put our index in first. So I'll put in my 4, then I'll go to my math, and we want to choose the fifth one. That's the one with the x for the index. So I choose it by pressing 5, the number that's in front of it. It does not put a beginning parentheses. You should put the beginning parentheses or always for this one. Then I'll put my x key, closing parentheses, and graph. And you'll see it looks like the square root, but it's a little bit closer down to the x-axis. So perhaps it looks something like that. Now, you may have done that problem, didn't put the parentheses, and you're thinking, well, he's full of it. You don't need to put the parentheses. If you have anything more complex than a single x here, then sometimes it will not work. I wouldn't be so bold to say it doesn't work all the time, but definitely you need the beginning parentheses, just as good practice. Our eighth one is the absolute value of x. Well, I'll press y equals, clear out wherever it's not a line. Now, if it's not on a button, it's not above a button, you're going to find it underneath the math button. It's kind of for graphing purposes. So I press my math. I want to right arrow to num. And you see our first one is the ABS. And I want to go ahead and press enter on it. It already has a beginning parentheses, so I just put in my x and then my closing parentheses. And then graph. And that gives us our V-shaped graph. Excuse me. Now, ninth one. I don't remember what this one is. X plus 2 over something. There it is. X plus 2 over x minus 3. So y is equal to x plus 2 over x minus 3. I could care less what this one looks like. I'm demonstrating how do you work with fractions on your calculator. And this is more in just graph mode, but this is anywhere. If you got more than a single number or a single variable on top or bottom, you put parentheses around the top or bottom. Since we got more than a single number or a single variable on top, we have to put parentheses around the top. And same thing on the bottom. Other than that, you type it in exactly as you see it. So I'm going to press my y equals, press my clear. I'll do a beginning parentheses, x plus 2, closing parentheses, divided by, beginning parentheses, x minus 3, closing parentheses. So that's how we type it in, and then we press graph. And try to sketch this. It won't be precise. I don't think it will be. And doing this from memory, which is questionable with me. Okay, more or less that's what our graph looks like. The reason why I even sketch it instead of telling you that's just your answer is if you see this vertical line here. Whenever you have a vertical line on your TI-83, that's never part of your graph. So that shouldn't be there. Some people think it's a vertical asymptote to put on there. It's not. It's a flaw with the calculator. I went out to TI's website and read, and I have a real exciting life, and they describe it as a flaw. So it's not a feature. They have it fixed on some models of the TI-84 and beyond. Okay, let's take a look at our next one. We've got y is equal to dash square root dash x dash 3. Okay, on our calculator, we have two dashes. We have the one on the very bottom. This is the negative. And then we have one on the side, and this is a minus. Now, some calculators this doesn't matter on, but some it does. Now, I'm pretty sure TI-83 does matter on. If your dash is at the very beginning of whatever, it's a negative. So this one right here is a negative. It's the beginning of our problem. If your dash is at the very beginning of something, it's a negative. This is the very beginning of our square root. So it's a negative. If your dash is not at the beginning, but it's between two items, like between an x and a 3, then it'll be a minus. So that's how we're going to enter it in. We'll enter it exactly as you see it, taking that into account. So press my y equals, press my clear. I put in my negative, then square root. So I do second x squared. And then the next one's a negative, x minus 3. And I'll put a closing parenthesis just for good practice. And then press graph. Okay. So what our graph looks like is this right here. Well, let's see what happens if I put the wrong little dash. We said that one's a negative. Let me say I put minus there first. And then I press graph. Get a syntax error. And you should never choose quit. You should always choose go to. So down arrow to go to and press enter on it. It'll go to exactly where the error is. See, you put the flashing cursor on my error. So now I put a negative there. Fix that one. If I press graph, it's okay. Now if I press y equals, and this negative here, let me say I put a minus here. It's wrong dash. Press graph. Gives me a syntax error. And again, if I choose go to, down arrow to it and press enter, it not only puts it on that line, it actually puts it on exactly where the error is. So you know you put the wrong little dash. So I'll put this one as negative. Well, you may be looking at that and say, well, why even bother then if it, worrying about this too much? Just put a dash. If it gives you an error, change it to the other one. Well, this one I said was a minus. Let's put a negative here. And then press graph. No longer did it actually give me an error. It just gave me the wrong graph. Now, that's frustrating. Come test time or final exam time, you just miss the problem completely if you're using the calculator to graph it. So it's sometimes it'll give you an error. Sometimes it just works, but gives you the wrong graph. So you have to know which dash to use. I'll change that back to a minus and then graph. Okay, let's look at our last graph. This one here. So we got y is equal to x to the x squared minus 3x plus square root of x power. I'm just combining the different building blocks that we've been looking at. Now remember earlier we said if you have an exponent that has more than a single number, a single variable in it, you put parentheses around the exponent. So when we plug this in, we want parentheses around the exponent. Other than that, we just type in as we see it. So I'm going to press my y equals, press my clear, do my x key. We always do an exponent with a caret, so I do caret, beginning parentheses, and then my x key, x squared, minus 3x, plus square root, so I do second x squared. Now I'll put my x key, I'll put a closing parentheses on a square root, closing parentheses on the exponent, and then press graph. And it gives us this. Maybe this is your answer. Sometimes when you get in more complex graphs, the TI-83, TI-84 series will fail, will not give you the right graph. But it's kind of the best we can do at this point. If you go on and take calculus of some sort, there's a whole chapter on how do you find a true picture of the graph. Now, let's say you don't like using technology. You like plotting points. In your previous class, your best point plotter there was. Everybody else was just happy with 3 points. You had to put like 10 points in your t-chart. You get this graph. And you think, okay, well, I know what that is. That's that U-shaped graph. That's that parabola. Looks like this. Maybe. Or maybe it looks like this. You just didn't plot enough points. Maybe what it looks like is this right here. You just didn't plot enough points. Maybe where this is coming down at is at x equals 500. You just needed to put 500 points in your t-chart, and you would have saw it come back down. Point plotting is the worst method in the world unless you know what the graph already looks like. Now think what I'm saying. You already know what the graph looks like. Well, if you already know what it looks like, what are you graphing it for? As you get into more advanced problems, you have no clue what it looks like. So the technology allows us to save a bunch of busy work, plotting points and t-charts and so forth, and get your picture. Now there are flaws with the graphing calculator. If my standard viewing window looks like this, I'm not going to see it come back down. Now there's the leading coefficient test that will help us a little bit in that regard, but for the most part, we just kind of live with that limitation, keeping in mind that if you want to understand a true picture of more complex graphs, you go on to calculus. To exit out of anything again is second mode, so that gets you out of the graph mode there. Now there's some graphs we didn't look at, the exponential, log, piecewise graphs. Those are covered in different videos. This one is just covering the basic graphs.